In part 3, we will start by adding a color picker so we are able to choose our brush color. Then we will learn how to clear our canvas so we can clear anything we added to the canvas while making sure our background image stays intact. Then we will add some objects to the canvas. This includes rectangle and circle. And lastly, we will learn about customizing object controls. I'm just going to switch my code back to the default brush. That is just my preference. We're only drawing with one color right now, but a nice thing to add would be a color picker. So I found this JavaScript color picker online, and here I'm just adding it to our project. I'm just copying the input HTML code to the top next to our buttons. I realized this next step I should have done first, but now I'm just downloading the JS Color JavaScript file and adding it to my lib folder. I'll start by setting black as the default color for the color picker, and I'll also create a color variable inside our index.js file so we can keep track of the current color. I want to update the color of the brush and the color variable whenever an event occurs on the input element. There are several ways we can do this, but I'm going to start by putting an ID on this input element. I'm going to create a function called setColorListener. My goal with setColorListener will be to update the color variable and change the color of the brush whenever the input field changes. We need a reference to our picker, so using that ID we had earlier, we can use document.getElementById to get a reference to it. Then we want to add an event listener to the picker so we know every time when the picker's value changes. We can look online or just console log the event to see different properties that exist on it, but in our case, event.target.value will contain the hexadecimal color value we're looking for. So when this event fires, I want to update the value of our color variable, and that's what I'm going to do here. Now that this color variable will contain the updated color of the color picker, we have to make sure that we're actually using this color on our brush. So in my toggle mode function, where we switch to the drawing mode, I'm going to update the brush color. There's one more thing we need to change. The input color picker gives us the hexadecimal value of the color, but it omits the hashtag, so I'm just adding it on here. And great, we can use the color picker and draw with whatever color we want. Now that we can actually draw on this canvas, it would be nice if there was a way for us to clear this canvas. Let's add a function for that. So I'm going to start by adding another button. I'll call it clear and it doesn't need to take any parameters. and I'll just call clear canvas on it. Actually, I take that back. I actually want to pass in the canvas as a parameter, just in case in the future, if you have multiple canvases, that would be a nice thing to have. Okay, so let's add the clear canvas function. I want to clear everything but this background image. So if we look at the canvas class, if we look clear, it clears all context, background, main, top. There might be several ways to do this, but what I like to do is specifically choose what I like to clear. Fabric Canvas has a function called getObjects. It returns us an array of the children objects, and simply I can just clear each element that is not the background image. And this would be easy for us to modify in the future if there are other things we do not want to be cleared from the canvas. I would just check to see if each of these objects are equivalent to the background image. If they are equivalent, or if it is equivalent since there's only one background image, I will not remove it. Technically, another way we could do this is use the filter method that's on the array and filter out for everything that's not equal to the background image, and we could just call remove on that. But in terms of complexity, they're identical and this works as well. And let's try drawing on a canvas. Oh, I think we left another button here. Okay, that looks better. Let's try this out. There's another typo. So yeah, this is working how I want it to. It's clearing everything but the background image. So that concludes our section on drawing. We learned how to toggle drawing in our canvas. We learned about different brushes, adding a color picker, and having this color picker change the color of our brush. And we learned how to clear our canvas. So let's learn about Fabric.js objects. Fabric object is just a root or base class where other shapes inherit from. And these shapes include circle, ellipse, line, path, and even things like text. I want to create a simple way for us to interact with several objects and add them into the canvas. So we'll start with the rectangle class and the circle class. Let's start by adding a menu down here. So we have our menu here. I'm just going to add some quick styling. So if you haven't hooked up your CSS file, make sure you do that now. Okay, so I styled this a tiny bit. So my goal is to be able to press rectangle and have a rectangle show up in our canvas, and press circle and have a circle show up in our canvas. Let's actually add the functions for adding the rectangle and adding the circle. I'll call it create rect and create circle. And I also want to pass in the canvas as a parameter. We can add this to our JavaScript file. And let's just double check these are working. That's a typo. Cool, so these functions are hooked up correctly. Let's actually start with adding a rectangle to the canvas. So here's the Fabric.js class for the rectangle. And we can see we can call this new rect to actually initialize using the constructor. We can just pass in an object which contains the options we want to set. Let's try it out. What options do we want to set for this rectangle? Width and height are a must, so let's set the width and height. We should probably set the color as well. So if we look in the class and we search for fill, we can see it's the color of the object's fill. I'll make my rectangle green. Canvas class has a method called add. It takes in the spread operator, and you can pass in 1, 2, or however many objects you want, comma separated. So in this case, we're just adding the rectangle. Okay, so we'll press rectangle, and it's added. The rectangle right now is added to the top left corner of the canvas. So let's kind of explain what's happening here. What Canvas is doing is they're specifying left as 0 and top as 0. Let's save and see how this affects the behavior. And if you can see here, the rectangle is placed in the exact same place. By default, the left property controls the x-axis and the top property controls the y-axis. So a positive x will move to the right and a positive y will move down. Currently, left and top are positioning the top left corner of our rectangle. Let's look at these left and top properties. Left position of an object. By default, it's relative to object left. And you can change this by setting origin x to left, center, right. Okay, that's pretty cool. We'll remember origin x. Let's look at the top property. Top position of an object. You can change this by setting origin y. Origin x, origin y are just both properties, so we can look at those as well. Horizontal origin of the transformation, left, right, or center. Okay, so what does this origin x and y do? So currently this left and top position, which correspond to the x and y offset, they are relative to the top left corner of the object. Origin x is set to left, origin y is set to top. So say we wanted to position the rectangle at a coordinate relative to the center of it. So let's keep this at 0, 0, and let's set origin x and y to center. The center of the rectangle is positioned at 0, 0. In this specific case, it doesn't seem very helpful, but what if we wanted to position the rectangle in the center of the canvas? So actually, let's try that out. Let's go to the canvas class and look for center. And eventually you find a function getCenter. Returns coordinates of a center of canvas. Return value is an object with top and left properties. Let's try this out. So we're given an object with a top and left property. So let's just set camCenter left to left. And we can set camCenter.top to top. The rectangle is positioned at the direct center of the canvas. Well, there's some other useful things. We can move it around. We can resize this rectangle. And we can even rotate this rectangle. It might be hard to see due to our blue background, but the controls are kind of dim. And we can easily fix this. While you could go into the rectangle class and look up controls, you'll find some stuff about it. Draw control, set control visibility, has controls, you can turn it to false so they are not displayed, but it makes us kind of go on a blind search. So actually, let's just try looking up Fabric.js controls. So we find the first link. It's a demo of the Fabric controls. So we could change corner color. And there are far more stuff you could play around with. But let's just try corner color. So here's corner color, and let's set it to something more visible in our background. Now we see our controls very clearly. Let's try the same thing for the circle. It'll be very similar to what we did with the rectangle, so you can pause and try this yourself if you want. I also want to position this in the center of the canvas. Just like we did with the rectangle, I'm going to call a constructor on the circle. It's the same with all the objects. This circle takes in an object that contains the options. For the circle, although it does have a width and height property on it, since it's part of the base class, we go to circle, we look at width, there's an object width, we look at height, we get object height, but it doesn't really make sense to set the width and height of a circle. There's an ellipse if we were wishing to create a stretch circle, so what does make sense is radius. I'm going to set this to 50. We also probably want to set the fill of the circle. We can do the left, top, origin X, origin Y, and corner color just as we did above. There we go, our circle is placed on the canvas, our rectangle is placed on the canvas. Say we didn't want the user to be able to scale their rectangle, rotate. These are all things that can be customized as well. So let's get back to the circle class and let's look for some properties. lockScaling X and lockScaling Y. These seem promising, so let's try these out. We can no longer scale our circle. And of course, there are other customizations we could do as well. We could make the corners completely transparent, or even adjust the size of this handle. I'm actually going to remove the lock scaling, since I kind of want this feature on. In part 4, we will talk about various Fabric.js topics. I will try to make this my final part for this Fabric.js tutorial, but there are a lot of topics to go through. We will first talk about object animations. So currently we are adding a rectangle and circle into the canvas, but these objects are just spawning in the middle of the canvas. Adding an animation can make it more customized. Then we will deal with object events and object caching. These are just two topics we'll touch while implementing some basic features to our project. We will learn how to group everything in our canvas and ungroup it so we can control them as a whole or individually. Then we will save the canvas state, meaning we can clear the canvas and we can restore what we just cleared. Lastly, we'll add an image uploader just so we have a basic example of how to add an image to the canvas.